Eliza's fingers had gone numb 3 steps from the barn door, and she still had 47 steps back to the shack. The wind screamed across the Nebraska wasteland like something alive and furious, turning the air itself into knives. She couldn't feel her feet anymore, couldn't see more than 2 feet ahead through the white chaos. The locals called this 50-foot stretch the grave for a reason. Her aunt had frozen to death making this exact walk. Eliza's lungs burned with each breath of sub-zero air. She was 16 years old, had $4 to her name, and was about to learn why everyone in town had told her to leave while she still could. Before we continue Eliza's story, please subscribe to our channel and stay with us until the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The lawyer's office in Valentine, Nebraska, smelled like old paper and cigarette smoke. Eliza sat in a wooden chair that was too big for her, her feet not quite touching the floor, while Mr. Garrison shuffled through documents with liver-spotted hands. "You're absolutely certain about this?" His voice carried the weight of a man who'd seen too many bad decisions. "The property's been vacant since your aunt passed. That was 6 months ago, middle of March. Found her frozen between the house and barn." "I'm certain." Eliza's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "You're 16 years old." 17 next month." "Still a child." Garrison removed his spectacles, rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The orphanage in Omaha will take you back. I've already spoken with them." "I'm not going back." "Miss Vale, I said I'm not going back." This time her voice had steel in it. "What do I need to sign?" Garrison stared at her for a long moment, then slid 3 papers across his desk. "Sign here, here, and here. The land is yours, all 160 acres of it. The shack, the barn, whatever's left of your aunt's belongings." He paused. "There's no money. She died owing the general store $43. Eliza signed her name in careful script, the pen scratching across paper. Her handwriting looked like a child's next to the printed text. "The locals call it the 50-foot grave," Garrison said quietly. "The distance between the house and barn. Your aunt made that walk thousands of times. Survived 28 winters out there. Then one day the wind came up wrong and—" He didn't finish. "How did she survive that long?" "I don't know. Stubbornness, maybe. She kept notebooks, wrote everything down. Wind patterns, temperature, snow depth. Town thought she was half mad." He pushed an envelope across the desk. "These are the keys. There's a wagon and horse at the livery you can use to get your things out there. The wagon's yours too. Your aunt owned it." Eliza took the envelope. The keys inside clinked together, cold and real. "One more thing." Garrison opened a drawer, pulled out a leather-bound journal. This was in her lawyer's box. Instructions were to give it to any surviving family. I suspect there's more of them out of the property. The journal was heavy in Eliza's hands. Her aunt's name was stamped on the cover. Margaret Vale. "Thank you, Mr. Garrison." "Don't thank me yet, girl. You'll curse my name come December." The ride to the property took 4 hours. The horse, an old mare named Rosie that the livery owner practically gave away, pulled the wagon with patient resignation. Eliza's entire worldly belongings fit in 2 canvas bags, 3 dresses, 2 pairs of stockings, 1 winter coat, undergarments, a hairbrush, and 5 books she'd stolen from the orphanage library before running away, plus the $4.37 in her pocket. The land appeared gradually, like something emerging from a fever dream. Flat, endless. The grass moved in waves under the October wind, already brown and dying. No trees, no hills, just wind and sky and the distant suggestion of mountains that might have been clouds. The shack sat in the middle of nothing. 1 story, Wood siding gone gray with age and weather. A crooked chimney. Windows that look like empty eye sockets. 50 feet away, the barn leaned slightly to the east, its red paint mostly gone, leaving bare wood underneath. 50 feet. The grave. Eliza stopped the wagon and sat for a long moment, looking at that distance. It didn't seem like much. A child could run it in seconds. "Well," she said to the horse, "here we are." Inside, the shack was worse than she'd imagined. One room, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet. A potbelly stove in the corner, the metal rusted through in places. A narrow bed frame with no mattress. A table missing one leg, propped up with books. Shelves lined with jars. Preserves, maybe, though most had exploded from freezing, leaving dried remnants and broken glass. The floor was dirt, packed hard as stone. But on the table, stacked in neat piles, were notebooks, dozens of them. Eliza picked up the top one. Her aunt's handwriting was precise, almost mechanical. November 3rd, 1867. Wind from northwest, sustained 40 miles per hour with gusts to 60. Temperature, 18 degrees. Snow depth, 14 inches. Journey to barn, 8 minutes, 30 seconds. Wind burn on exposed skin despite wrappings. Must find better solution. The next entry. November 4th, 1867. Attempted hay bale windbreak along south edge of path. Wind knocked it down within 3 hours. Wrong angle. Wrong construction. Page after page, year after year. 28 years of measurements, failures, small victories, constant observation. The last entry was dated March 18th, 1889. Wind from north, straight down the gap. Cannot delay feeding the animals. Will attempt the crossing. If I don't return, whoever finds this. The answer is in the architecture, not the materials. Eliza closed the notebook carefully. Her hands was shaking. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Vale?" A man's voice, rough with age and tobacco. "Name's August Redden. Got the property 3 miles east. Saw smoke from your chimney. Well, figured I should check if you were real or just another ghost story." Eliza opened the door. The man standing there was maybe 60, maybe 80. Hard to tell with faces that had lived through decades of prairie wind. He wore a heavy sheepskin coat and a hat pulled low. "I'm real," she said. "So I see." He studied her with eyes that missed nothing. "You're the niece, then? The orphanage girl?" "Yes." "They tell you about the 50 feet?" "Everyone's told me about the 50 feet." "But you came anyway." It wasn't a question. He shifted his weight, looked past her into the shack. "Your aunt was a strange woman. Good woman, but strange. Brilliant, maybe. Hard to say. Spent near 3 decades trying to solve a problem most folks would just accept." "What problem?" "How to walk 50 feet without dying." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Simple question, no simple answer. She came close, I think. That last winter, before she passed, she was excited about something. Talked about architecture and compression and things I didn't understand. Then the wind came up wrong one day in March, and... He stopped. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear that. I need to hear everything." August studied her again. "You planning to stay?" "I don't have anywhere else to go." "That's not the same as planning to stay." "It's all I have." He nodded, slowly. "Winter's coming early this year. I can feel it in my bones. You got maybe 3 weeks before the first real storm. After that..." He gestured at the gap between shack and barn. "After that, You'll understand why they call it the grave. The wind comes down through here like water through a funnel, picks up speed, drops the temperature. You can't see, can't breathe, can't think. Your aunt timed it once. 47 seconds of exposure in a bad blow will give you frostbite. 2 minutes will kill you. Then how did she survive 28 years? Carefully, very, very carefully, and with a lot of luck. He pulled a burlap sack from his coat. Brought you some potatoes and some salt pork. Figure you don't have much in the way of provisions. Eliza took the sack, felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Come spring, if you're still alive, you can thank me then. He turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Your aunt's notebooks. She left instructions that any family should have access to all of them. There's more in the barn. 17 years worth, maybe more. She kept them in a trunk in the hayloft. After he left, Eliza stood in the doorway and looked at the barn. 50 feet. In the fading October light, it might as well have been 50 miles. The first night, she didn't sleep. The wind came up after midnight, howling around the shack like something trying to get in. The potbelly stove barely kept the room above freezing. Eliza lay on the bare bed frame, wrapped in every piece of clothing she owned, plus her winter coat, and listened to the wind test every crack and gap in the walls. She thought about the orphanage, the cold oatmeal every morning, the dormitory that smelled like unwashed girls and despair, the headmistress who'd called her ungrateful when she'd asked about her family, about whether anyone had ever claimed her. "Your mother left you on the steps when you were 3 days old," the woman had said, voice clipped and precise. "No note, no name, no family. You should be grateful for the charity we've shown you all these years." Grateful. Eliza had smiled and said, "Yes, ma'am." And 2 weeks later, she'd run away with nothing but stolen books and a name she'd made up for herself because they'd never bothered to give her a real one. And then Garrison's letter had found her, forwarded through 3 different orphanages, telling her about an aunt she'd never known existed, an aunt who died alone, frozen solid, trying to feed her animals. The wind screamed louder. Eliza pulled the coat tighter and made a decision. Morning came gray and bitter. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees overnight. Eliza's breath fogged in the shack, despite the stove burning steadily. She ate a cold potato for breakfast, then put on every layer she owned and opened the door. The barn waited. 50 feet of absolutely level, open ground. The wind cut across it like a razor. "All right," Eliza said out loud. "Let's see what all the fuss is about." She stepped outside. The wind hit her like a physical thing, stealing her breath, pushing her sideways. Her eyes watered immediately, tears freezing on her cheeks. The cold went through her coat, her dress, her skin, straight to her bones. She started walking. 10 feet. The wind got worse. 20 feet. She couldn't feel her face. 30 feet. Her hands inside her mittens had gone numb. 40 feet. She couldn't see the barn anymore through the tears and wind. 45 feet. Her lungs burned with every breath. She touched the barn door and nearly sobbed with relief. Inside, the barn was marginally warmer, maybe 10 degrees above outside. 2 horses stood in stalls, watching her with patient eyes. A milk cow in another stall. Chickens roosting in the rafters, all of them skinny, but alive. "Well," Eliza said to them, her voice shaking, "I guess I'm your keeper now." The animals said nothing. She found the hay bales stacked along one wall, found the grain barrel, found the water trough frozen solid. She broke the ice with a hammer, gave each animal water and feed, collected 3 eggs from the chickens. The whole process took an hour. Then she had to make the walk back. The return trip was worse. The wind had shifted, coming straight down the gap now, and Eliza understood for the first time what August had meant about the funnel effect. The air itself seemed to accelerate, to concentrate all its fury on this one small space between two buildings. She made it back to the shack, stumbled through the door, and collapsed on the floor. Her entire body shook. Her face felt like raw meat. Her fingers wouldn't work properly. And she had to do this every day, twice a day. Once in the morning, once in the evening. Every single day until spring. "No," she said out loud. "There has to be another way." The notebooks. She spent the rest of that day reading. Her aunt's precise handwriting documented everything. Wind speeds, temperatures, failed attempts at creating shelters and windbreaks, experiments with canvas walls, torn apart in hours, experiments with wooden barriers, knocked down by the wind's force, experiments with digging trenches, filled with snow and became death traps. But as Eliza read deeper, she noticed a pattern. Her aunt had been learning. Each failed attempt taught her something new. The notes became more technical, more focused on specific problems: wind compression, thermal loss, structural integrity under load. And then, about 15 years in, a new phrase appeared: straw bale architecture. May 2nd, 1874. Observed Miller Farm using straw bales for livestock shelter. Bales compressed, stacked in double wall configuration. Wind cannot penetrate. Interior temperature 20 degrees warmer than exterior. Concept: could the same principle create a passage? Eliza sat up straighter. The next several years of notebooks were filled with experiments. Her aunt had tried stacking bales in different configurations. Straight walls, too much wind pressure. Curved walls, better but unstable. Tunneled configurations, promising but collapsed under snow weight. The most recent notebook from 1888 had drawings. Detailed architectural sketches showing a tunnel made of straw bales, with specific measurements for width, height, and the curve of the roof. Notes about compression ratios, about moisture management, about how to stake the structure so it wouldn't shift. And then that final entry. The answer is in the architecture, not the materials. Eliza looked up from the notebook. The wind outside had picked up again, rattling the shack's walls. She thought about August's words: "You got maybe 3 weeks before the first real storm." 3 weeks to build something her aunt had spent 15 years trying to perfect. 3 weeks to solve the 50-foot grave, or 3 weeks to decide if she had the courage to die trying. That night, she dreamed of tunnels made of golden straw, of walking through them while the wind screamed overhead, of reaching the barn with warm hands and clear eyes. She dreamed of her aunt, frozen solid, one hand stretched toward the barn door she'd never reached. She woke with tears on her face, and a decision made. The next morning, she hitched Rosie to the wagon and drove into Valentine. The general store owner, a thick-necked man named Paulson, looked up when she entered. His expression went from curious to dismissive in seconds. "You're the Vale girl. Heard you were out at the old place." "I need supplies." "You got money?" "I have $4. Paulson snorted. "Your aunt died owing me 43. I'd need that settled before I could extend any credit." "I'm not asking for credit. I'm asking what I can buy with $4. "Not much. Certainly not enough to get you through winter." Eliza set the $4 on the counter. "I need rope, the strongest you have, and stakes, metal stakes if you have them." Paulson raised an eyebrow. "Planning to stake something down?" "Yes." "What?" "A windbreak." The store went quiet. 2 other men shopping had stopped to listen. "Your aunt tried that," Paulson said slowly. "Every year. Tried canvas, wood, even dug ditches. Nothing worked. She was close. I read her notebooks. She almost had it." "Almost don't keep you from freezing." $4, Eliza said firmly. "Rope and stakes. whatever that will buy." Paulson studied her, then shrugged. "Your funeral." He gathered rope and 6 metal stakes, counted out the cost. "This'll get you about 60 feet of rope and 6 stakes. That's $3.80. The rest in flour. That's maybe 2 pounds of flour." "I'll take it." As she was leaving, one of the other men, younger, maybe 25, with kind eyes, stepped forward. "Miss, I'm Thomas Webb. I helped your aunt a few times, brought her supplies when the snow got bad. She was a good woman. Strange, but good." He hesitated. "What kind of windbreak are you planning?" "Straw bales, configured like a tunnel." Thomas's eyes widened. She talked about that. The last year, she talked about it constantly. Said she'd finally figured out the architecture. He glanced at Paulson, then back to Eliza. "I got maybe 300 straw bales from this year's harvest. You're welcome to them. No charge." "I can't." "Your aunt helped my ma when she was sick. Sat with her for 3 nights straight. Didn't ask for anything. Figure I owe the family." He smiled. "Besides, I'm curious if it'll work." Eliza felt something crack open in her chest. "Thank you." "I'll bring them out tomorrow. But miss," his expression turned serious, "you got maybe 2 weeks now. The almanac's calling for an early winter. First real blow could come any day after that. 2 weeks." Eliza drove back to the homestead with the rope, the stakes, and the first real hope she'd felt since arriving in Nebraska. The next day, Thomas arrived with 3 wagon loads of straw bales, each bale compressed and tied with wire. He helped her stack them near the shack, then showed her how to test their stability. "They're heavy," he said, "maybe 40 pounds each. You stack 'em wrong, they'll fall on you. Stack 'em right, they'll hold against anything short of a tornado." He demonstrated the proper lifting technique. "Bend your knees, not your back. And for God's sake, ask for help if you need it." "I will." He looked at her doubtfully. "You're what, 90 pounds?" 95. "And you're planning to move 300 of these by yourself, stack them in some kind of tunnel configuration, and somehow make it all stable before winter hits?" "Yes." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, but it was a sad sound. "You're just like her. Your aunt, stubborn as a mule and twice as determined." He climbed back onto his wagon. "Good luck, Miss Vale. You're going to need it." After he left, Eliza stood looking at the mountain of straw bales and the 50 feet of empty ground between her and the barn. 2 weeks, 300 bales, and absolutely no idea if any of this would work. She picked up the first bale, felt its weight settle into her shoulders, and started walking. The first bale nearly killed her. Eliza bent her knees like Thomas had shown her, wrapped her arms around the compressed straw, and lifted. The weight hit her shoulders like a collapsing wall. Her knees buckled. The bale slipped from her grip and crashed onto her right foot. She didn't scream, couldn't afford to waste the breath, but sat hard on the frozen ground, gasping, her foot throbbing through the worn leather of her boot. "Get up," she said out loud. "Get up right now." Her foot screamed when she put weight on it. Probably just bruised, maybe broken. Didn't matter. She had 299 bales left to move, and 13 days before Thomas's predicted storm. She tried again. This time she got the bale to her chest, staggered 3 steps, and dropped it. Her arms felt like they'd been torn from the sockets. By sunset, she'd moved 11 bales. At this rate, she'd finish sometime next spring, long after she'd frozen to death. That night, she couldn't lift her arms above her shoulders, couldn't grip the spoon to eat the potato soup she'd made. Just sat at the crooked table, crying silently, her whole body one massive bruise. "You're going to die out here," she whispered, just like she did. But morning came anyway, and with it, a choice. Keep trying or give up. Eliza chose to keep trying. Day 2 was worse. Her muscles had stiffened overnight into rigid cords of agony. The first bale took her 10 minutes to lift. She vomited twice from the pain. But she moved 15 bales that day. Then 18 the next. Then 23. Her hands developed blisters that popped and bled and formed calluses. Her shoulders turned purple with bruises. She learned to use her legs more, her back less. Learned to roll the bales instead of carrying them when possible. Learned to hate the wind that pushed her sideways with each trip across the gap. On day 5, August appeared with his wagon. "Jesus Christ, girl!" He climbed down slowly, staring at her work. She'd managed to create 2 short walls flanking the shack's door, maybe 10 feet long each, 4 bales high. "You're actually doing this." "Trying to." Eliza's voice came out hoarse. She'd been talking to herself to stay awake, to keep moving. "You can't do this alone. You'll kill yourself." "Then I'll die trying." August studied her with those sharp old eyes. "Your aunt said the same thing once, year before she passed. I told her she was crazy, building windbreaks at her age. She said dying from trying was better than dying from giving up." He shook his head. "Stubborn woman." "Did you help her?" "No, she wouldn't let me. Said it was her problem to solve." He was quiet for a moment. "She died anyway." "I know. But you're going to keep building." "I don't have a choice." August walked to the pile of remaining bales, put his hands on one, tested its weight. "I got maybe 6 hours before I need to get back to my stock. My back's not what it used to be, but I can still lift." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes again. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm doing it anyway." He lifted the bale with a grunt. "Now show me where these go. And don't argue with me, girl. I'm too old to waste time on arguments." Together, they moved 47 bales that day. August showed her how to stagger the layers, how to pack the bales tight so wind couldn't slip between them, how to angle the walls to deflect the worst gusts. "Your aunt's notebooks," he said during a break, both of them breathing hard. "She wrote about compression and architecture. You read those parts?" "Yes. She said the tunnel needed to curve, like an arch. Said straight walls would collapse under the snow weight." "Smart woman. The curve distributes the load." He sketched in the dirt with a stick. "You're building walls right now, but eventually you'll need to bring them together overhead. That's when it gets dangerous. The whole structure could come down on you if you don't secure it right." "The stakes and rope." "That'll help, but you'll need more than that. You'll need—" He stopped, cocked his head. "You hear that?" The wind had shifted, coming from the north now, straight down the gap, and it carried a smell Eliza had learned to recognize. Snow. "Storm's coming early," August said quietly. "Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight." "I'm not ready." "No one's ever ready." He stood, joints cracking. "Come on, we need to move as many as we can before it hits." They worked through sunset, through twilight, into full dark with only a lantern to see by. Eliza's entire body had gone beyond pain into a strange, floating numbness. She moved like a machine, lift and carry, stack and compress, over and over, until the movements became automatic. August finally called a halt near midnight. "That's it. I'm done. You should be too." They'd built the walls to 15 feet on each side, 4 feet high, with the beginnings of a curve starting to arch overhead. It wasn't a tunnel yet, wasn't even close, but it was more than Eliza had thought possible. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. You got maybe 150 bales left to place, and that storm's going to hit before dawn. You won't be able to work in it. Could be 3 days before it clears. Could be a week." He climbed onto his wagon with obvious effort. "You got enough food?" "Some," That means no. I'll send Thomas out when the storm breaks. He's young and stupid enough to make the trip. August gathered the reins, then paused. Your aunt, Margaret. She was the closest thing I had to a friend out here. 28 years of watching her fight this land, fight the wind, fight her own stubborn pride. And in the end, the wind won. He looked at Eliza directly. Don't let it win this time. The storm hit 2 hours later. Eliza was in the shack, trying to eat a piece of salt pork, when the wind changed. Not gradually, all at once, like something had broken. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in minutes. The walls began to shake. Then the snow came. She'd seen snow before, at the orphanage, light dustings that melted by noon. This wasn't that. This was a white wall, a solid mass of wind and ice that erased the world. She couldn't see the barn anymore, couldn't see her partial tunnel, couldn't see anything beyond the window except white chaos. The animals. She hadn't fed the animals. Eliza pulled on her coat, wrapped a scarf around her face, and opened the door. The wind hit her like a fist, drove her backward into the shack. Snow poured through the open door, already forming a drift. She tried again, leaning into the wind, and managed 3 steps outside before she realized the truth. She'd die if she kept going. The barn was invisible. The ground was invisible. She had no idea which direction was which. 3 steps, and she was already completely disoriented. She retreated to the shack, slammed the door, and stood there shaking. The animals would have to fend for themselves. There was enough hay in the barn to last a week, enough water if they broke the ice. They might survive, but they might not, and she could do nothing about it. The storm lasted 4 days. 4 days of howling wind and snow so thick it buried the shack's windows. 4 days of the potbelly stove burning constantly, consuming her meager supply of firewood. 4 days of rationing her food. 1 potato per day, 1 piece of salt pork, the 2 pounds of flour stretched into thin gruel. 4 days of silence, except for the wind's endless screaming. On the 3rd day, Eliza started reading her aunt's notebooks again. Not for information, but for company. The precise handwriting felt like a voice, like someone was there with her. December 14th, 1881. Trapped in shack for 5 days. Stock survived on stored hay. Lost 3 chickens to cold. The isolation is worse than the hunger. The wind sounds like voices. I know they're not real, but I answer them anyway. Eliza understood now. The wind did sound like voices, like someone calling her name, like her mother, the mother she'd never known, standing just outside the door, asking to be let in. December 20th, 1881. Storm finally broke. Emerged to find 2 feet of snow, drifts to 6 feet. Tunnel to barn completely buried. Spent 9 hours digging path to animals. They were weak, but alive. Note: any structure must account for snow accumulation. Tunneled design would preserve passage even under heavy snow. On the 4th day, the wind stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. Eliza stood at the window, looking out at a world transformed. Snow everywhere, smooth and white and deadly beautiful. The barn was a dark shape in the distance, half buried. And her tunnel. The partial walls she'd built had collapsed. The bales lay scattered, half buried in drifts. The careful architecture destroyed by 4 days of relentless wind and snow weight. Eliza sat down on the floor and didn't move for an hour. When she finally stood, her legs had gone numb. She put on her coat, wrapped the scarf around her face, and went outside. The snow came to her knees. Each step was a battle. The 50 feet to the barn took 20 minutes, and when she finally reached it, she was gasping, her lungs burning from the cold air. Inside, the animals were alive, but suffering. The water was frozen solid. The horses stood with their heads down, shivering. The cow hadn't been milked in 4 days and was clearly in pain. The chickens huddled together for warmth. "I'm sorry," Eliza said to them. "I'm so sorry." She spent the next 6 hours caring for them, breaking ice, hauling water from the well, feeding them from the dwindling hay supply, milking the cow, collecting the few eggs the traumatized chickens had produced. Her hands froze and thawed and froze again. Her face went numb. Her feet lost all feeling. The walk back to the shack nearly killed her. Halfway across, her legs gave out and she fell face first into the snow. For a long moment, she couldn't get up, couldn't see the point. The tunnel was destroyed. Winter had barely started. She had months of this ahead. "Get up," she said into the snow. "Get up, Eliza. Get up right now." She got up. That night, Thomas arrived with supplies: a ham, flour, coffee, and a bottle of whiskey. "August sent me," he said, stamping snow from his boots. "Said you'd probably be dead, but I should check anyway." He looked around the shack, at her haggard face, at the frost coating the inside of the windows. "Jesus, you look like a ghost." "The tunnel collapsed." "I saw, or what's left of it." He set the supplies on the table. "August said to tell you something. Said your aunt's last attempt at a tunnel collapsed too. Year before she died. Knocked her flat on her back, broke 2 ribs. She spent a week recovering, then started building again." "Why? If it collapsed once, why try again?" "Because giving up meant dying slowly instead of quickly. At least this way, she was fighting." Thomas poured whiskey into 2 tin cups, handed her one. "Drink. You need it." The whiskey burned going down, but the warmth that followed was worth the pain. "I can't do this," Eliza said quietly. "I thought I could, but I can't. It's impossible." "Probably is. So I should give up?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "My pa died when I was 12. Farming accident. Left my ma with 6 kids and 40 acres that barely produced enough to feed us. Everyone said she should sell, move to town, find work as a laundress or something. She said no. Said the land was ours, and we'd make it work, or die trying." He smiled, but it was sad. "We almost died. That first year we ate nothing but potatoes and rabbit for 8 months straight. But we survived. And the next year was better. And the year after that, even better." "Your mother sounds strong." "She was stubborn. There's a difference." He finished his whiskey. "But sometimes stubborn is all you got. Stubborn and the willingness to try again after you fail." He stood. "I'll come back in a week. Bring more supplies. By then you'll have decided whether you're staying or going." After he left, Eliza sat at the crooked table and looked at her aunt's notebooks. Page after page of failures. Years of collapsed structures, destroyed experiments, wasted effort. But her aunt had kept trying, right up until the day she died. The next morning, Eliza started rebuilding. She worked differently this time, slower, more carefully. She studied her aunt's architectural drawings for hours before placing a single bale, measuring angles, calculating loads. She used the rope and stakes to create a framework first, something the bales could lean against, something to distribute the weight. The work was even harder than before. The snow made every step treacherous. The bales were partially frozen, harder to move, and she was weaker now, undernourished and exhausted from the storm. But she kept moving, one bale, then another, then another. On the 3rd day of rebuilding, she heard hoofbeats. August appeared with his wagon and, unexpectedly, two other men, ranchers from properties to the south. "Heard about what you're trying to do," one of them said. His name was William something. Eliza was too tired to catch it. "Sounds crazy, but August says your aunt almost had it figured out. And I lost 4 head of cattle to the cold last week because I couldn't get to the shelter in time. So if you're crazy, maybe we all need to be a little crazy." They worked together for 2 days. The men moved the heavy bales while Eliza directed placement, following her aunt's designs, adjusting for what she'd learned from the collapse. The tunnel began to take shape, a curved passage, 6 feet high, 4 feet wide, with walls 3 bales thick for insulation. William's companion, an older rancher named Ernst, studied the structure with professional interest. This would change everything. A man could tend his stock in any weather, could save hundreds of animals every winter. "If it works," August said. "If it works," Ernst agreed. By sunset of the second day, they'd completed 30 feet of tunnel. The curved roof held, the walls stood firm, but 20 feet remained, the most difficult section, where the tunnel would have to account for the barn door's placement and create a seal that would keep the wind out. "We'll come back next week," William said. "Finish it then, weather permitting." But the weather didn't permit. That night, the temperature dropped to 15 below zero. The next morning, William's son arrived with a message. His father had developed pneumonia and couldn't leave the house. Ernst had pulled his back and was bedridden. August's own health had worsened. He was coughing blood. Eliza was alone again. She stood looking at the partial tunnel, at the 20 feet that remained, and felt something break inside her. Not her resolve, that was still there, stubborn and unyielding. But her hope, that was gone. 20 feet. It might as well have been 20 miles. She went to the barn, fed the animals, sat on a hay bale, and finally let herself cry. Not quietly, not with dignity. Great heaving sobs that tore from her chest, months of fear and exhaustion and grief all pouring out at once. "I can't do this alone," she said to the cow. "I can't. It's too much." The cow chewed her cud, unconcerned. When Eliza finally stopped crying, the sun had set. She sat in the dark barn, too tired to move, too cold to care. That's when she heard it. A voice, faint and distant, coming from somewhere outside. "Hello? Anyone here?" Eliza stood slowly, walked to the barn door, looked out into the darkness. A woman stood in the snow, maybe 30 years old, wearing a fine wool coat that marked her as someone with money. Behind her, a covered wagon, a good horse, and the young girl, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the wagon seat. "I'm sorry to intrude," the woman said. Her voice was educated, Eastern. "We were traveling to Valentine when our wheel broke about a mile back. I saw smoke from your chimney and thought—" She stopped, noticing Eliza's face, her obvious exhaustion, the half-built tunnel. "Oh my God, are you all right?" Eliza opened her mouth to say yes, to maintain some shred of dignity, but what came out was the truth. "No, I'm not all right. I'm trying to build something impossible, and I'm failing, and I don't know what to do anymore." The woman studied her for a long moment. Then she turned to the girl on the wagon. "Sarah, bring the medical kit and the food basket. We're staying here tonight." "Ma'am," Eliza said, "I don't have anything to offer you. The shack is barely—" "I'm Dr. Catherine Winters," the woman said firmly, "and I didn't ask if you had accommodations. I said we're staying. Now let's get my daughter inside before she freezes, and you can tell me about this impossible thing you're building." Dr. Catherine Winters moved through the shack with the efficiency of someone who'd dealt with worse. She took one look at Eliza's hands, raw, bleeding, wrapped in dirty rags, and set her medical kit on the table without asking permission. Sit down, Catherine said, not a request. I need to help your daughter. Sarah knows how to start a fire and heat water. She's been doing it since she was 6. Sit down. Eliza sat. Catherine unwrapped the rags from Eliza's hands, and her expression tightened. When did you last clean these wounds? I don't remember. They're infected. 2 of these fingers could develop gangrene if left untreated. She opened her kit, pulled out bottles and bandages. This is going to hurt. The antiseptic burned like liquid fire. Eliza bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. You're building that tunnel structure outside, Catherine said, working methodically. Alone. Not entirely alone. People helped, but they can't anymore. Why not? Sick, injured, their own families to care for. Eliza's voice shook. And I'm running out of time. Another storm could hit any day, and if the tunnel isn't finished, you'll freeze trying to reach your animals, just like your aunt did. Catherine's hands paused. I heard about Margaret Vale. The whole territory heard about her. The eccentric woman who spent 3 decades trying to solve an unsolvable problem. It's not unsolvable. She almost had it. I found her designs, her calculations. It can work. But not if you kill yourself trying. Catherine finished bandaging the left hand, started on the right. How old are you? 17? Almost. Jesus, you're a child. I'm not a child. Eliza stopped, swallowed hard. I'm all I have. This land is all I have. If I don't make it work, I have nowhere to go. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. That's not entirely true. Before Eliza could ask what she meant, Sarah came in with a pot of heated water and a sack of supplies from the wagon. Mama, their stove is almost out of wood, and they don't have any real food. Just potatoes and some salt pork. We have food in the wagon. Bring the ham and the bread, and the preserves. Catherine finished wrapping Eliza's hands. There, keep these clean and dry. Change the bandages every day. If you see red streaks running up your arm, you come find me immediately, because that means blood poisoning, and you'll be dead in 3 days. You're leaving tomorrow? We'll see. Catherine stood, studied the shack with a critical eye. First things first. Sarah, help me bring in our bedrolls. We're staying until that wheel is fixed. Might be a day, might be 3. Sarah's eyes went wide. But Mama, you said we needed to reach Valentine by... Plans change, sweetheart. This young woman needs help, and we're going to provide it. That night, with the stove burning and actual food in her stomach, Eliza told them everything. About the orphanage, about inheriting land from an aunt she'd never known existed, about the notebooks and the failed attempts and the impossible 50 feet that had already killed one woman. Catherine listened without interrupting. Sarah sat close to her mother, eyes wide with a child's fascination for dramatic stories. So you're trying to recreate your aunt's final design, Catherine said when Eliza finished. Based on incomplete notes and architectural drawings you're interpreting on your own? Yes. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Catherine almost smiled. Probably. She pulled one of Margaret's notebooks closer, studied the drawings with obvious intelligence. I'm not an architect, but I am a surgeon. I understand structural integrity, bones, joints, how weight distributes through a system. Your aunt's design is sound. The curved roof, the triple-layer walls, the staggered placement for stability. It should work. Should. But theory and practice are different things. You said the first attempt collapsed during the storm. The walls weren't secured properly. I've fixed that problem, used stakes and rope to create a framework. But I'm only 30 feet in. 20 feet remain, and those are the hardest. the section that has to seal against the barn door. Catherine flipped through more pages, stopped at a detailed sketch. What's this? Eliza looked. Her final design, the compression chamber. See how the bales stack here and here? It creates a dead air space that should trap heat and block wind. But I haven't reached that part yet. Can't even think about it until the basic tunnel is complete. How long do you estimate completion will take? Working alone? Maybe 2 weeks, maybe more. And the next storm? Could come any time. The almanac predicted early winter, and it's already proven right. We could have 3 days. We could have 3 hours. Sarah spoke up suddenly. Why don't we help? Both women turned to look at her. Sarah, Catherine started, you said we're staying until the wheel is fixed. That's at least a day, maybe 2. We could help her build. I'm strong. I can lift things. You're 10 years old. I'm almost 11, and you always say idle hands are the devil's workshop. We'd just be sitting here anyway. Might as well do something useful. Catherine looked at her daughter with an expression Eliza couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe, or fear. Then she looked at Eliza. How much could 3 people accomplish in 2 days? I don't know. Maybe 10 feet of tunnel? Maybe more if we work fast. Then we work fast. Catherine stood, all business now. We start at first light. Sarah, you're on water duty and supplies. Eliza and I will handle the heavy lifting. We work until we can't work anymore or until that wheel is fixed. Whichever comes first. Eliza felt something crack open in her chest again. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. Catherine's expression softened. Because when I was 19, my father died and left me with nothing but medical school debt and a younger brother to raise. Everyone said I should give up, find a husband, let someone else take care of the problem. I said no, finished medical school anyway, practiced anyway, raised my brother anyway, and eventually married a man who respected what I built instead of demanding I tear it down. She paused. I see that same stubborn refusal to quit in you, and I'll be damned if I let that fire go out because you ran out of help at the wrong time. They started at dawn. Catherine proved to be stronger than she looked. Years of surgical work had given her hands and arms substantial strength. Sarah ran between the shack and the worksite, bringing water, tools, anything they needed. The work went faster with 3 people. Eliza directed placement, while Catherine lifted, and together they began extending the tunnel at a pace Eliza hadn't thought possible. 6 feet by noon, 9 feet by late afternoon, 12 feet by sunset. But Catherine's wheel remained broken. I could fix it, Eliza said that night. I've done wagon repairs before. Tomorrow, Catherine said. Her voice was tight with exhaustion. Tonight, we rest. The second day brought progress and disaster in equal measure. They started early, pushing hard, and by mid-morning had extended the tunnel another 4 feet. 16 feet completed. Only 4 feet remained. Then Sarah, running too fast with a bucket of water, slipped on ice and fell hard. The crack of bone breaking was audible even over the wind. Catherine was beside her daughter instantly. Don't move, sweetheart. Sarah's face was white, tears streaming. My arm, Mama, my arm. Catherine examined it with gentle, professional hands. Fractured. Clean break, thank God. But you're done working. But the tunnel. The tunnel doesn't matter. You matter. Catherine's voice broke. My God, what was I thinking, bringing you out here, letting you... Mama, I wanted to help. You're a child. You should have been safe in the wagon, not hauling water in sub-zero temperatures because I got caught up in... She stopped, took a deep breath. Eliza, I need to splint this. Do you have any straight pieces of wood? They fashioned a splint from broken fence posts and wrapped it tight. Sarah cried quietly through the whole process, trying to be brave. "We're leaving," Catherine said when it was done. "As soon as I fix that wheel, we're leaving." "Of course. My daughter needs her mother to stop playing hero and start acting like a parent." Catherine's hands shook as she packed her medical kit. "This was a mistake. Coming here, staying, thinking I could—" She pressed her palms against her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We'll go now, right now. The wheel is broken. Then I'll fix it in the dark if I have to." Eliza watched Catherine gather their belongings with frantic, guilty movements and felt something shift inside her. This woman, this educated, wealthy, capable woman, was falling apart because her daughter had gotten hurt while helping someone else. And Eliza understood, suddenly, what it meant to have someone who cared that much about you. "Dr. Winters," Eliza said quietly. "Catherine, please stop." Catherine stopped, but didn't turn around. "Sarah is going to be fine. You set the bone perfectly. She'll heal." Eliza moved closer. "And you didn't make a mistake. You taught your daughter something important. That when someone needs help, you help them. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Especially then." "She broke her arm." "Accidents happen. But look what she helped build." Eliza gestured toward the window, toward the partial tunnel standing firm against the wind. "She did that. She's 10 years old, and she built something that might save lives. How many children can say that?" Catherine finally turned. Her eyes were wet. What if it had been worse? What if she'd— But she didn't. She's alive and safe and proud of what she accomplished. I can see it in her face. Sarah, sitting on the bed with her splinted arm, nodded. "I am proud. And Mama, we're so close. Only 4 feet left. You and Eliza could finish it tomorrow." "Your arm will heal, but her tunnel won't build itself." Sarah's voice was small but determined. "You always say we help people who need it. She needs it." Catherine looked at her daughter, then at Eliza, then out at the partial tunnel standing in the twilight. "One more day," she said finally. "We fix the wheel tonight, finish the tunnel tomorrow, then we leave. Agreed?" Agreed. They worked on the wagon wheel by lantern light, Catherine holding the light while Eliza hammered the broken spoke into place and reinforced it with wire. The work was meticulous, frustrating, and took 3 hours. "Where did you learn to do this?" Catherine asked. "Orphanage. They hired out the older girls for labor. I spent 6 months working at a stable, learned basic repairs." Eliza tested the wheel, spun it slowly. "This won't hold forever, but it should get you to Valentine." "And then?" "And then you take Sarah to a real doctor. Have that arm properly set. Live your life." Eliza hammered the final nail. "Forget about this place. Will you forget about it?" Eliza was quiet for a long moment. "I can't. This is all I have." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got." The third day dawned clear and bitterly cold, 20 below zero, according to August's thermometer that hung on the shack's door. The kind of cold that made breathing painful, that turned exposed skin white in seconds. Catherine and Eliza worked without speaking, their breath fogging between them, hands going numb despite gloves. 4 feet. It seemed like nothing. It seemed impossible. The final bales had to be placed perfectly, angled to create a seal against the barn door, compressed tight enough to block wind, but not so tight the structure became unstable. Eliza worked from her aunt's drawings, measuring twice, placing once, praying it would hold. By noon, they were 3 feet in. By mid-afternoon, 3.5 feet. Sarah watched from the shack window, her good hand pressed against the glass. "One more course," Eliza said. Her voice was hoarse from breathing cold air. "One more layer and we seal it." They lifted the final bales together. Eliza's bandaged hands screamed in protest, but she ignored the pain. Catherine grunted with effort, her face red from exertion and cold. They positioned the bales, hammered stakes, tied rope, compressed everything tight. And then it was done. The tunnel was complete. Eliza stood at the shack end, looking through to the barn door at the far side. 50 feet of protected passage, curved roof overhead, triple-layer walls, dead air spaces for insulation. "We need to test it," Catherine said. They walked through together. The wind, which had been howling all day, vanished the moment they entered. The temperature inside the tunnel was maybe 10 degrees warmer than outside. Not warm, but survivable. Their breath still fogged, but they could breathe without pain. They emerged at the barn door and looked back. The tunnel stood firm, solid, real. "My God," Catherine whispered. "It actually worked." Eliza couldn't speak, could barely stand. 3 weeks of impossible work, of failure and pain and nearly dying, and it was done. The tunnel was finished. They walked back through to the shack. Sarah met them at the door, bouncing with excitement despite her broken arm. "You did it! You actually did it!" Eliza nodded, then sat down hard on the floor. She was shaking, couldn't stop shaking. Catherine knelt beside her. "You're in shock. When did you last eat?" "I don't remember." "Sarah, bring the bread and ham. And water." Catherine felt Eliza's forehead. "You're burning up. When did you start feeling ill?" "I'm not ill, I'm just—" Eliza stopped. She was ill. Had been for days, maybe longer. Too focused on the tunnel to notice her own body failing. Catherine cursed under her breath. "Infection from your hands. It's spread. You need antibiotics, rest, proper medical care." She looked at Sarah. "Change of plans. We're not leaving today." "But Mama, you said—" "I know what I said, but she's sick, and there's no one else to care for her. We stay until she's stable." "What about my arm?" "Your arm is set properly. It'll be fine for another few days." Catherine helped Eliza to the bed. "Right now, we have a bigger problem." The fever came that night. Eliza drifted in and out of consciousness, hearing voices that might have been real or might have been the wind. Her mother calling, her aunt saying, "The answer is in the architecture." Catherine's calm physician's voice, "Drink this. You need to drink." She dreamed of tunnels that stretched forever, of walking through them while snow fell outside, of reaching the end and finding nothing but more tunnel, more walking, more endless cold. When the fever finally broke, 3 days had passed. Eliza woke to find Sarah sitting beside the bed, reading aloud from one of the stolen library books. "You're awake," Sarah said, setting the book aside. "Mama said you'd wake up today. She's always right about medical things." "How long?" 3 days. You had blood poisoning. Mama said it was close. Another day and you might have—" She stopped. "But you didn't. You're going to be fine." Catherine came in carrying a pot of soup. "Finally decided to rejoin the living, I see. Sit up. Slowly. You need to eat." The soup was chicken and vegetables, rich and hot. Eliza ate slowly, her body weak but functional. "The tunnel," she said between spoonfuls. "Did it hold?" "We had another storm 2 days ago. 18 inches of snow, winds to 50 miles per hour. Your tunnel didn't even shift." Catherine smiled. "I've been using it to tend your animals, twice a day, like clockwork. They're fine." "You're welcome." Eliza set down the spoon. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. You were dying." "But Sarah's arm is healing nicely. Children heal fast." Catherine sat on the bed's edge. "Besides, I made a promise to see this through. I keep my promises. You promised to leave after the tunnel was done. I promised to help. Helping doesn't end just because the building is finished. Catherine's expression turned serious. Eliza, I need to tell you something. Something I should have mentioned days ago, but didn't because I was being a coward. What is it? Catherine took a breath. I'm not traveling to Valentine for leisure. I'm traveling there because I'm opening a medical practice. The first female physician in the territory. I bought a building, hired staff, arranged everything. My husband died last year, left me enough money to finally do what I've always wanted. She paused. And I need someone to help run the clinic. Someone smart, capable, willing to learn. Someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing. Eliza stared at her. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a choice. You can stay here, on this land, fighting this climate alone. Or you can come to Valentine, learn medicine, help me build something that will save lives all across the territory. You'd have a room, a salary, an education. A future that doesn't involve freezing to death between a shack and a barn. I don't know anything about medicine. You can learn. I'll teach you. And in return, you teach me about survival, about building things that shouldn't be possible, about refusing to quit when everyone says you should. Catherine's voice softened. Margaret Vale spent 28 years on this land, alone, trying to solve one problem. And she did solve it. You proved that. But imagine what she could have accomplished if she'd had help. If she'd built something bigger than one tunnel on one property. Eliza's throat tightened. You're saying I should leave. I'm saying you have a choice. And choice is something you haven't had much of in your life. That night, Eliza walked through the tunnel alone. The wind screamed overhead, but inside the passage, everything was quiet. Peaceful. The bales smelled like summer hay, and her footsteps were muffled by packed snow. She stood at the barn door and looked back toward the shack. The tunnel worked. After 3 weeks of impossible labor, after nearly dying, after everything, it actually worked. Her aunt had been right. The answer was in the architecture. But Catherine was right too. What came next? The answer came in the form of hoofbeats 3 days later. Eliza was in the barn, mucking stalls, when she heard voices outside. Men's voices. Angry. She stepped into the tunnel, walked through to the shack end, and found 5 men standing in her yard. She recognized Paulson from the general store. The others were ranchers, hard-faced men with work-roughened hands and eyes that assessed everything in terms of profit and loss. Miss Vale, Paulson said. No greeting, no warmth. We need to talk about your structure. Catherine appeared in the shack doorway, Sarah behind her. Is there a problem, gentlemen? You the lady doctor? One of the ranchers asked. His name tag said Morrison. Dr. Catherine Winters. And yes, I am a lady, and yes, I am a doctor. Your point. Morrison's jaw tightened. My point is, you got no business encouraging this girl to build illegal structures on her property. Illegal? Eliza stepped forward. This is my land. I can build whatever I want. Not when it violates county ordinances, you can't. Paulson pulled a paper from his coat. Section 14, subsection C. No permanent structures may be erected within 50 feet of existing buildings without county approval and inspection. Your tunnel violates that code. Eliza's stomach dropped. I didn't know. Ignorance ain't a defense. Morrison crossed his arms. Structure needs to come down. Today. Absolutely not. Catherine's voice cut like a scalpel. That tunnel saved this girl's life. She nearly died of infection while building it. You expect her to tear it down and go back to freezing every time she needs to feed her animals? Expect her to follow the law, same as everyone else. The law is meant to protect people, not kill them. The law is the law. Paulson's expression was harder now. You got until sunset to start dismantling. Otherwise, we bring the county sheriff, and he'll do it for you. They left before Eliza could respond, just climbed on their horses and rode away, leaving her standing in the snow with her world collapsing again. They can't do this, Sarah said. Can they, Mama? Catherine's expression was grim. Legally, yes, they absolutely can. If there's a county ordinance and Eliza violated it, they have every right to demand compliance. But that's not fair. Fair doesn't matter. Legal matters. Catherine turned to Eliza. Did you check for building codes before starting construction? I didn't even know building codes existed. I was trying to survive. I know, but survival and legality aren't always compatible. Catherine thought for a moment. We need to see that ordinance, the actual text. Paulson could be lying, or misinterpreting, or applying it incorrectly. Where would we find it? County Courthouse in Valentine, which means we need to go there. Now. They hitched Catherine's wagon and made the 4-hour journey to Valentine. The town was bigger than Eliza had imagined. Maybe 200 buildings, actual streets, people everywhere. The courthouse was a 2-story brick building with Cherry County Courthouse carved above the door. Inside, a clerk with ink-stained fingers listened to their request with obvious boredom. Building ordinances, those are public record. You can review them here. He pulled a massive leather-bound volume from a shelf, dropped it on the counter. Section 14 starts on page 47. Eliza flipped through the pages, her heart sinking with each word she read. The ordinance was exactly as Paulson had described. No permanent structures within 50 feet of existing buildings without approval and inspection. It's real, she said quietly. They could make me tear it down. Catherine was reading over her shoulder. Wait, look at subsection D. Eliza read. Exemptions may be granted for structures deemed essential to life, safety, or agricultural operations, upon review by the county commission. Essential to life, Catherine repeated. Your tunnel absolutely qualifies. We file for an exemption. How long does that take? The clerk shrugged. Commission meets once a month. Next meeting is... He checked a calendar. 3 weeks from now, December 18th. 3 weeks. Eliza's voice was hollow. Paulson said I had until sunset today. Paulson doesn't make the rules. The county does. Catherine turned to the clerk. We need to file an emergency petition for exemption. Is there a form? There's always a form. He pulled out paperwork. But emergency petitions require a hearing before a judge within 72 hours. And Judge Whitmore is out of town until next week. Then we wait for next week. The clerk's expression suggested he'd seen this pattern before. You can file. Doesn't mean they'll grant it. And in the meantime, if Paulson brings the sheriff, let him bring the sheriff. We'll file criminal charges for destruction of essential life-saving equipment. Catherine's voice had gone cold and clinical. I'm a licensed physician. I'll testify under oath that removing that tunnel would constitute negligent endangerment of my patient's life. The clerk blinked. You'd actually do that? Try me. They filed the paperwork, paid the fee. $2 Eliza didn't have, but Catherine provided without hesitation, and left with a stamped copy showing their petition was officially pending. On the ride back, Sarah asked the question Eliza had been avoiding. What if they deny the exemption? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then Eliza will have to make a choice. Tear down the tunnel and comply with the law, or refuse and face legal consequences. What kind of consequences? Fines, property seizure, possibly jail. Eliza stared at her bandaged hands. 3 weeks of work, nearly dying. All of it potentially for nothing because she hadn't checked a law book she didn't know existed. This is why I left, she said quietly. The orphanage. Everyone always had rules, and the rules never made sense. And if you broke them, even accidentally, you got punished anyway. The law isn't perfect, Catherine said, but it's better than chaos. Without rules, the strong just take whatever they want from the weak. But these rules are protecting the strong. Paulson and Morrison, they don't care if I freeze. They care about control. Maybe, but that's why we fight within the system, not against it. We make our case. We show the judge that your tunnel saves lives. We win the exemption. And if we don't win? Catherine didn't answer. They arrived back at the homestead near sunset to find August waiting, sitting in his wagon, looking older and frailer than Eliza had ever seen him. "Heard about Paulson's visit," he said. His voice was weak, rough, with fluid in his lungs. "Came to tell you something important." "August, you shouldn't be out here. You're sick." "Dying. Let's call it what it is." He climbed down from the wagon with obvious effort. "Which is why I need to say this now. Your aunt, Margaret, she filed for that same exemption 9 years ago. Built a partial windbreak, tried to get county approval." "What happened?" "They denied it, said it was an eyesore, a hazard, a violation of property aesthetics." His expression was bitter. 2 weeks later, a storm came through. She tried to reach the barn without the windbreak. Fell, broke her hip. Laid in the snow for 4 hours before I found her. Nearly died then. Would have, if I hadn't been checking on her. But she survived. Survived that time. Got scared, though. Tore down the windbreak herself. Spent the next 9 years planning, measuring, designing something they couldn't say no to. August's eyes were wet. And then she died before she could build it. The weight of those words settled over them like fresh snow. "So the county killed her," Eliza said. "Not the wind. The county." The county and her own pride. She could have left. Could have sold this land, moved somewhere warmer, somewhere easier. But she was stubborn. Thought if she just made the design perfect enough, showed them enough data, they'd have to approve it. August coughed, a wet, rattling sound. They never would have. Paulson owned property next to hers. Wanted to buy this land for pennies after she froze. Still does. That's why he's so eager to tear down your tunnel. Catherine's expression went hard. That's corruption. That's business. And out here, they're the same thing. August pulled an envelope from his coat. "This is Margaret's original petition. Every measurement, every calculation, every piece of evidence she gathered. I kept it after she died. Thought maybe someday it would matter." He handed it to Eliza. "Use it. Show the judge what she spent decades trying to prove." Eliza took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of pages. Wind speed measurements, temperature logs, architectural drawings, testimonials from neighbors about the harsh conditions. "There's something else," August said quietly. Last page. Eliza flipped to it. A letter, written in her aunt's precise handwriting. "To whoever finds this, I've spent 28 years on this land, fighting wind and cold and my own stubborn refusal to quit. I've failed more times than I can count. But I've learned something valuable. The problem isn't the cold or the wind or the distance. The problem is isolation. One person alone can't survive this. But a community working together could thrive. My tunnel design isn't just for me. It's for everyone who struggles with this same impossible 50 feet. If I die before I build it, I hope someone braver finishes what I started. And I hope that someone shares it with others, so no one else has to die the way I probably will." Eliza read it twice, her eyes burning. She wanted to help people, she said, not just herself. "Always did. That's why Paulson hated her. She wouldn't sell, wouldn't quit, wouldn't play his game. August started to climb back into his wagon, then stopped. One more thing. The hearing next week. I'll testify. Tell the judge what I saw, what Margaret suffered through. How many times I found her half frozen because she couldn't make that walk safely. August, you can barely breathe. You can't. I'm dying anyway. Might as well die doing something useful. He smiled, but it was sad. Besides, I made a promise to Margaret. Told her that if she died before getting that tunnel built, I'd make sure someone finished it. You finished it. Now I'm going to make sure you keep it. He left before Eliza could argue. That night, Catherine spread Margaret's papers across the table and read through them with the same careful attention she'd give a medical journal. "This is remarkable," she said after an hour. "Your aunt wasn't just building a windbreak. She was conducting a multi-decade engineering study. These measurements, these calculations, they're publication-worthy, scientific." "Will it be enough to convince the judge?" "I don't know, but it's the best evidence we have." Catherine looked at Eliza directly. "You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we lose, that the judge sides with Paulson, and you have to tear it down." "I won't." "Then they'll arrest you." "Let them." "Eliza." "I nearly died building that tunnel. My aunt spent 3 decades trying to solve that problem. I'm not tearing it down because some corrupt store owner wants my land." Eliza's voice was shaking but firm. "If they want it gone, they'll have to tear it down themselves while I watch." Catherine studied her for a long moment. "You understand what you're saying? You're choosing this land, this fight, over everything else. Over the job I offered. Over safety. Over a future that doesn't involve fighting." "I know." "And you're certain?" Eliza thought about the orphanage, about running away with nothing, about inheriting land she'd never seen from an aunt she'd never known, about 3 weeks of impossible work, of freezing and bleeding and nearly dying, about walking through the completed tunnel, feeling warm for the first time in months. "I'm certain." Sarah, who'd been quiet through the whole conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Mama, can we stay for the hearing?" "Sarah, we need to get to Valentine. My practice." "Your practice can wait 1 more week." "Can't it?" Sarah's eyes were bright with determination. "She needs help. You always say we help people who need it." Catherine looked at her daughter, then at Eliza, then out the window at the tunnel standing firm against the darkness. "1 week," she said finally. "We stay for the hearing, but after that, win or lose, we have to leave. Agreed?" "Agreed." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Catherine helped Eliza organize Margaret's papers into a coherent presentation. Sarah copied out the temperature logs in neat handwriting for the judge to review. Thomas arrived with more supplies and an offer to testify about the tunnel's construction. Even William and Ernst sent word they'd come to the hearing if needed. But the night before they were supposed to leave for Valentine, everything changed. The storm hit with no warning. One moment the sky was clear, the next it was black with clouds. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in an hour. The wind came screaming down from the north, straight through the gap between shack and barn. "Get inside!" Catherine shouted over the wind. "Everyone inside, now!" They made it to the shack seconds before the full fury hit. The walls shook, the windows rattled, snow poured sideways, driven by wind that sounded like a living thing trying to tear the world apart. "The animals," Eliza said. "I need to—" "You can't." Catherine grabbed her arm. "You go out in that, you'll die. Simple as that." "But they'll freeze." "They have the barn. They have hay. They'll survive." Catherine's grip tightened. "You won't. Not in that wind." Eliza pulled free, went to the door, opened it an inch. The wind ripped it from her hand, slammed it against the wall. Snow poured in, already forming a drift. And through the white chaos she could see it, the tunnel entrance. Dark, protected, waiting. "The tunnel," she said. "I can go through the tunnel." Catherine's eyes widened. "We don't know if it'll hold in this kind of wind. It could collapse." "It'll hold. It has to." Eliza pulled on her coat, wrapped the scarf around her face. This is what it was built for, this exact moment. "Eliza, wait!" But she was already stepping into the wind. The cold hit her like a wall, stealing her breath, making her eyes water instantly. She couldn't see, couldn't think, took 3 steps and lost all sense of direction. Then her hand touched straw, the tunnel entrance. She stepped inside, and the world transformed. The wind vanished. The temperature rose. She could breathe without pain, could see clearly, could think. The tunnel held. She walked through to the barn, her footsteps steady, her hands already warming. The animals looked up when she entered. The horses, the cow, the chickens. All of them safe, waiting, trusting she would come. Eliza fed them, watered them, checked each one carefully. The whole process took maybe 20 minutes. Then she walked back through the tunnel to the shack, emerging warm and dry and alive. Catherine and Sarah stared at her like she was a ghost. "It worked," Eliza said simply. "The tunnel worked." Catherine didn't speak for a full minute, just stood there staring at Eliza, then at the tunnel entrance, then back at Eliza. "You walked through that," she finally said. "In the worst storm I've seen in 20 years. And you're fine." "I'm fine." Eliza unwrapped the scarf from her face. Her cheeks were pink from cold, but not frostbitten. Her hands were warm inside her mittens. "The tunnel works exactly like my aunt designed it. The wind can't penetrate. The curve deflects the snow. Inside, it's survivable." Sarah rushed forward, threw her good arm around Eliza. "You could have died." "But I didn't, that's the point." Eliza looked at Catherine. "Tomorrow, when we go to that hearing, we're not just showing them papers and measurements. We're showing them proof. I just walked 50 feet in conditions that killed my aunt, and I didn't even get frostbite." Catherine's expression shifted from shock to something else. Understanding, maybe. Or respect. "We photographed the tunnel," she said, already planning. "Document it. Measure the temperature difference. I'll write a medical affidavit stating that without this structure, you would have frozen to death attempting to care for your animals tonight. We turned this storm into evidence." They worked through the night while the winds screamed outside. Catherine took measurements. Temperature inside the tunnel versus outside. Wind speed reduction. Time required to traverse the passage safely. She wrote everything down in her precise physician's handwriting, signed and dated each page. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving 3 feet of fresh snow and a world transformed into white silence. And the tunnel still stood, not damaged, not even shifted. The curved roof had shed the snow exactly as Margaret's designs predicted. They left for Valentine at first light, the wagon loaded with documentation that now included Catherine's medical evidence and photographic proof of the tunnel's effectiveness in extreme conditions. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread somehow about the orphan girl who'd built the impossible tunnel, about the county trying to tear it down, about the hearing that would decide it all. Ranchers filled the benches, townspeople crowded the doorways, and in the front row sat Paulson and Morrison, with a lawyer Eliza had never seen before. Judge Whitmore was a severe woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled back tight, eyes that missed nothing. "This is a petition for emergency exemption from county building ordinances," she said, reading from the paperwork. "Filed by Miss Eliza Vale, regarding a straw bale tunnel structure on her property. Mr. Paulson, you're opposing this petition? Paulson stood. Yes, Your Honor. The structure violates Section 14, subsection C. It's an illegal building, and we're asking the court to order its immediate removal. And Miss Vale, you're arguing the structure qualifies for the life safety exemption under subsection D? Eliza stood, her legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor. Present your evidence. Catherine stood beside her. Your Honor, I'm Dr. Catherine Winters, licensed physician. I've been treating Miss Vale and observing conditions at her property for the past 2 weeks. I'd like to present medical testimony regarding the necessity of this structure. The judge nodded. Proceed. Catherine laid out the case with surgical precision. The temperature logs, the wind speed measurements, the medical evidence of frostbite danger, Margaret's 28 years of documentation, and finally, the events of last night. Eliza walking through the tunnel in a blizzard that would have killed her in open air. This isn't a vanity project, Catherine concluded. It's life-saving infrastructure. Without it, Miss Vale cannot safely care for her livestock, cannot safely maintain her property, cannot survive on her own land. The tunnel isn't optional. It's essential. Paulson's lawyer stood. Your Honor, emotional arguments aside, the law is clear. Building codes exist for public safety. If we allow one person to violate them, where does it end? Public safety? Catherine's voice went cold. You want to talk about public safety? This girl nearly died from infected hands sustained while building this structure. Died from blood poisoning trying to create something that would keep her alive. And your client wants to tear it down so he can buy her land cheap after she freezes to death? The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered her gavel. Order! Dr. Winters, that's a serious accusation. It's a true accusation. Mr. Paulson tried to buy Miss Vale's property 3 times. She refused each time. 2 weeks ago, he personally informed her she owed $43 to his store, a debt from her deceased aunt that legally died with the estate. He's using county ordinances as a weapon to force her off her land. Paulson shot to his feet. That's a lie. Is it? Because I have the debt collection letter you sent her, dated after her aunt's death, citing a debt that cannot legally be collected from an heir who never assumed the original obligation. Catherine pulled out a paper. I showed it to 3 lawyers in Valentine. They all said the same thing. This collection attempt is fraudulent. The judge's expression hardened. Mr. Paulson, is this true? Your Honor, that debt is legitimate. The debt may be. The collection from Miss Vale is not. She's not legally responsible for her aunt's debts unless she explicitly assumed them. Did she? Paulson's face was red. No, but... Then Dr. Winters is correct. You're attempting fraudulent debt collection. The judge made a note. We'll address that separately. Right now, we're here about the tunnel. Mr. Paulson, do you have any evidence that this structure poses a public safety risk? Paulson's lawyer stood again. Your Honor, the structure hasn't been inspected by county engineers. We don't know if it's safe. Then inspect it. The judge looked at her clerk. Send county engineers to Miss Vale's property within the week. If they determine the structure is unsafe, we revisit this hearing. If they determine it's sound, the exemption stands. Your Honor, Paulson started. I'm not finished. Miss Vale, how many other homesteaders in this county face similar conditions? Long distances between buildings, deadly wind exposure, livestock that need daily care regardless of weather. Eliza thought of August, of Thomas, of William and Ernst, and the dozen other ranchers who'd mentioned the brutal conditions. Most of them, Your Honor. Maybe all of them. And if your tunnel design were made available to others, could they build similar structures on their own properties? Eliza understood suddenly where this was going. Yes, my aunt's designs are detailed enough that anyone could follow them. The judge smiled slightly. Then I'm granting your exemption on one condition. You make those designs public. You teach others how to build what you've built. You turn your aunt's 28 years of research into something that benefits the entire community. The courtroom went quiet. Your Honor, Paulson's lawyer said desperately, you can't mandate that she share private property. I'm not mandating anything. I'm conditioning the exemption on public benefit. Miss Vale can accept or decline. The judge looked at Eliza directly. What's your answer? Eliza thought about her aunt's final letter. I hope that someone shares it with others, so no one else has to die the way I probably will. I accept, Your Honor.
I'll share everything.
Then the exemption is granted. County engineers will conduct a safety inspection within 7 days. If the structure passes, it becomes a permanent legal building. If it fails, Miss Vale will have 30 days to make corrections or remove it. The judge hammered her gavel. Court adjourned. Paulson was on his feet, shouting something about appeals, but the crowd was already surging forward. Ranchers wanting to see the designs. Townspeople congratulating Eliza. Catherine keeping people back, while Sarah beamed with pride. In the chaos, Eliza saw August standing in the back of the courtroom. He looked even frailer than before, but he was smiling. She pushed through the crowd to reach him. You did it, he said quietly. Margaret would be proud. You testified. I saw your name on the witness list. Didn't need to, in the end. That doctor friend of yours did all the heavy lifting. He coughed, the sound wet and painful. But I would have. Wanted you to know that. August, you need to see a doctor. I've seen doctors. They can't do anything for me. He pressed something into her hand. A key. This is for Margaret's trunk, the one in the barn loft. Inside, you'll find all her original notebooks, her architectural drawings, everything. I kept them safe for her. Now I'm giving them to you. August. Spread them around. Teach people. Make sure she didn't die for nothing. His eyes were wet. And Eliza? Don't spend 28 years alone on that land like she did. Build your tunnel. Help your community. But don't forget to live. He left before she could respond, walking slowly through the crowd, each step obviously painful. The county engineers came 3 days later. 2 men with measuring instruments and notebooks, skeptical expressions, and a job to do. They spent 6 hours examining the tunnel, measured every angle, tested every joint, assessed structural integrity under varying loads. Eliza and Catherine stood nearby, watching in silence, while Sarah fed the chickens and tried not to look anxious. Finally, the lead engineer, a stocky man named Harrison, emerged from the tunnel and consulted his notes. It's sound, he said, and Eliza's knees nearly buckled with relief. Better than sound, actually. The triple-layer construction provides insulation and structural redundancy. The curved roof distributes snow load effectively. The compressed bales create a rigid framework that resists wind pressure. And the dead air spaces. He shook his head admirably. Whoever designed this understood thermodynamics at an advanced level. My aunt. She spent 28 years working on it. Harrison looked at Eliza with new respect. She was an engineer. Maybe didn't have the formal education, but she was an engineer nonetheless. This design could revolutionize cold-weather agriculture across the Northern Territories. He signed the inspection form. Structure is approved for permanent use. I'll file the certification with the county tomorrow. After they left, Eliza sat on the shack steps and cried. Not from sadness, from relief so overwhelming it had nowhere else to go. Catherine sat beside her, put an arm around her shoulders. "You won. We won. You fought for me. August testified. Thomas brought supplies. Sarah helped build. Everyone, you built it. The rest of us just helped keep you alive while you did." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I meant what I said about the job offer. It's still open. You could come to Valentine, learn medicine, help run the clinic. Leave this place behind." "I can't." "I know. I knew you'd say no even before I asked." Eliza looked at the tunnel, at the land stretching away in all directions, at the shack that was slowly becoming a home. "My aunt spent her whole life trying to solve one problem. She died before she could finish. But I finished it for her, and now that judge wants me to teach others, to make sure Margaret's work helps the whole community." She wiped her eyes. "That's not something I can walk away from." Catherine nodded slowly. "Then I have a different proposal. I'll come here, once a month. Bring medical supplies, check on you, make sure you're staying healthy. In exchange, you teach me about survival, about building things that shouldn't work but do. We help each other." "You'd do that?" "I would. And so would Sarah," Catherine smiled. "She's been talking non-stop about the tunnel, about how she helped build it. It's the proudest I've ever seen her. Children need that, need to know they can do hard things, build impossible things." Sarah appeared around the barn corner, carrying eggs. "Mama, are we staying?" "No, sweetheart. We're going to Valentine like planned. But we'll come back to visit. Every month." "Can I help Eliza teach people about the tunnels?" Catherine looked at Eliza, who nodded. "Yes, you can help." Word spread fast. Within 2 weeks, ranchers from across Cherry County were arriving to see the tunnel, to study Margaret's designs, to ask questions about construction. Eliza showed them everything: the staggered bale placement, the curve calculations, the compression ratios, the staking patterns. Thomas was the first to build his own tunnel, then Ernst, then William, then a dozen others. By the time spring arrived, protective passages were appearing on properties across the territory, each one slightly different, but all based on Margaret's core design. August died in February, peacefully in his sleep. He left his property to Eliza with a note. "You finished what Margaret started. Now finish what I started. Prove that this land doesn't have to kill the people who love it." The funeral was small. Just Eliza, Catherine, Sarah, Thomas, and a handful of ranchers who'd known him. But standing at his grave, watching the wind blow across the frozen prairie, Eliza understood something important. Her aunt hadn't failed. August hadn't failed. They'd both fought impossible odds and survived decades longer than anyone thought possible. And in the process, they'd gathered the knowledge, the data, the experience that made Eliza's success possible. She hadn't built the tunnel alone. She'd built it on the foundation they'd laid. By spring, Eliza's homestead had become a teaching center. Catherine visited monthly as promised, bringing medical supplies and taking students who wanted to learn frontier medicine. Sarah came too, helping with the animals, learning about architecture and engineering from studying Margaret's designs. The shack got a new roof, thanks to Thomas and William. The barn got reinforcements, and the tunnel, the impossible life-saving tunnel, stood firm through 3 more brutal storms, protecting Eliza and her animals every single time. The territorial newspaper ran a story about her. "Orphan girl solves decades-old problem, saves lives across territory." The article included Margaret's photograph, her story, and detailed construction plans for the tunnel design. Eliza cut out the article, folded it carefully, and placed it in Margaret's trunk alongside the original notebooks. On the 1-year anniversary of her arrival in Nebraska, Eliza stood at the barn door and looked back through the tunnel toward the shack. 50 feet. The distance that had killed her aunt. The distance she now walked multiple times a day, without fear, without pain, without even thinking about it. The wind howled overhead, cold and fierce and eternal. But inside the tunnel, everything was quiet. She'd learned what her aunt spent 28 years trying to prove. Survival wasn't about being stronger than the elements, or braver, or more stubborn. It was about understanding the problem deeply enough to engineer a solution. It was about refusing to accept that some challenges were unsolvable. It was about building something that transformed impossible into routine. And most importantly, it was about sharing what you learned so others didn't have to suffer the same way you did. Eliza walked through the tunnel one more time, her footsteps steady and sure, and emerged into the warm spring evening with the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Finishing her aunt's work, teaching others, proving that even the harshest land could be made livable with enough ingenuity, enough perseverance, and enough willingness to help the person struggling next to you. The 50-foot grave had become a 50-foot garden, and Eliza Vale, orphan, survivor, builder of impossible things, had transformed her inheritance from a death sentence into a legacy of life.